Joining Brian Lehrer on the Apollo Theater stage is the co-chair of the 2017 Women's March and former executive director of the Arab American Association of New York, Linda Sarsour. Journalist and hip-hop activist Rosa Clemente, and co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Khan-Cullors.
So with the Me Too movement, maybe something is actually changing this time about male privilege in the workplace. We will see. And it's no coincidence that the major organized pushback to Trump's inauguration last year was organized as a women's march. There will be a big anniversary women's march here in New York next Saturday. So as we observe Martin Luther King Day, let's talk about this intersectionality. I know you've each spoken about patriarchy as part of your work and your activism. I wonder if you would each want to reflect a little bit about the intersection of patriarchy and white supremacy and how much the movements against racism and misogyny can work together rather than on separate tracks. Linda, would you like to begin?
First of all, I just want to say I'm so honored and humbled to be here today, and especially an honor in the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And what I will say to folks in this room is Donald Trump didn't introduce patriarchy or misogyny or sexism or racism or xenophobia or homophobia to me. Welcome to everyone else that woke up on November 9th of 2016. For me, I just want to be really clear. We talk a lot about this women's movement and feminism and patriarchy. I'm part of a women-led movement that is for everyone. This is a movement that is being led by women, and anyone who trusts the leadership of women is part of the movement that I'm a part of. I'm not part of a movement that excludes anyone, including male allies, my son, my partner, my father, my brother, my grandfather. We are all in this together at this moment. So we got to be in this together. And at the root of every problem that we have, patriarchy, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, I can take you down the list. White supremacy is the foundational issue and has always been the foundational issue. So if you want to be down with the movement that we are a part of, this is not just necessarily a movement against patriarchy, it's a movement to dismantle white supremacy in this country. And that's how we're going to create the real country that we all know we have the potential to be. So if you're in it with us, we are a women-led movement that is out to dismantle white supremacy.
Rosa Clemente.
Well, first was good Harlem, you know, while it's still a little bit black, because who knows how it's going to be in 5 years from now, but, and I got to touch this, I can't believe it, like, oh my God, what's happening? Look, I'm a Bronx-born Afro-Boricua, black Puerto Rican woman, grew up in New York City, and first for all my non-gender conforming people, and all the queer folks, and all the young folks who've been putting their bodies on the line, thank you. Because I think you're fulfilling the radical dream that Dr. King had. And it was funny because I looked at how they titled this in our call sheet, and it said Women and Modern Movements. Like women haven't been in movements forever, have not been leading, have not been fighting. You know, so I think for me, the work is now about how we build a youth to movement pipeline. I don't think that we can wait till young people are exposed after 18 or 21 in a college environment or a work environment to deal with issues of white supremacy, patriarchy, and really the overarching to all of this is capitalism. We live in a society where everything is monetized, where everything is monetized, our bodies, our work, our looks, where we live and how we live, right? Our food, all of it, environmental justice, all of that. And where we're really seeing all of this intersect is in Puerto Rico, where my people have been abandoned, forgotten not only by the government, not only by both parties, but by most people who are in movements, right? So to me, we can't just use intersectionality as the thing that's hot and a trend right now. Because a lot of times in this movement work, things become real trendy, but the most marginalized people are still forgotten.
That's right.
Even though the most marginalized people are always the center of movements and power. And I think it's just very important that we, as we continue to do our work, whether it's been 15, 20, 25 years, that we start teaching our babies from the time they come out of the womb to understand these systems, because the system kills 7-year-olds like Ayanna Jones and 12-year-olds like Tamir Rice, and the system killed Erica Garner. So we got to teach them from the time they're coming out that they are part of this movement, that is not an add-on to your life, that it is your life.
Patrice Cullors.
I'm so grateful to be here, honored to be on this panel. I think this is our first time we're on a panel together. Linda, same with you. I think it's the first time we're on a panel together. I just want to take a moment to honor all the work and all the labor and the centuries of fight for Black liberation in this country and throughout the world. When Black people get free, everybody gets free.
That's right.
And, you know, this question about patriarchy and our movements and legacy, the first people I think about when I think about the fight against patriarchy is Ella Baker. I think about Harriet Tubman. I think about Fannie Lou Hamer. I think about Shirley Chisholm. I think about all the Black women who labored invisible, whose labor was invisible. It took this, you know, decade and our movement moment to actually lift up Ella Baker's name, to know that she was actually the architect of the civil rights movement. And she had a significant amount of tensions with the idea of this MLK as a messiah. And we live in a culture that's deeply obsessed with seeing one single individual, usually a man, to lead us to freedom. And that's actually never how it's been.
Yep.
There's always been women, mostly women of color, specifically Black women, who figured it out, helped us survive, and helped us thrive. And I think as long as we are a part of the generation that honors us, and is committed to that honor, and is committed to saying, no, actually, this is who's doing this work, we're going to win.
That's right.
So I was thinking, listening to you just now say this is the first time you've been on a panel with Rosa and with Linda, that because of the truly all-star nature of this panel, if maybe each of you might have a question for one of the others of you and give you the moderator power.
Brian, that's your job.
I'm like, no, I love that idea.
I've got a million questions, but I'd like to share it. Patrice, anything that you would like to ask of these two by way of their work or the connections between your work or just anything you're curious about?
Yes, actually. I'm like, I love that idea. I want to ask you a question, Rosa, because you just spoke specifically about the youth to movement pipeline. And I want to know, just given your own experience in this movement, why you feel like that's important and why you're sort of creating that term and trying to bring that conversation to light.
Yeah, I mean, even though I grew up in the Bronx, you know, in the 70s, the creation of hip hop, and in my latter years, I grew up in Westchester County, just, 18 miles from here. It wasn't until I went to the State University of New York at Albany that I even knew that Puerto Rico was a colony, that I knew about political prisoners, that I heard the word the Black Panther Party or the Young Lords. And I remember coming home and asking my parents, like, how am I speaking Spanish, grew up proud to be Puerto Rican, went to the parade, got family, go everywhere, and I don't know anything about my history or my people. And I remember taking one specific class with a professor by the name of Dr. Vivian Verdell Gordon that was in the academy, one of the first women to write about this intersection of the race, gender, and class within Black women. And she told me, don't be mad at your parents, right? Because there's a reason they hid the strength and the resistance of Puerto Rico. So for me, I said, I think it was too late for me to learn that at 20. So when I had my daughter, even when they brought the birth certificate and they checked Hispanic, I said, you can give me another birth certificate. She's not Hispanic. She is a black Puerto Rican. They said, we don't have a category. I said, well, you're going to have one now.
Yes.
By the way, I went to Albany too, so don't let anybody tell anybody that you can't get a good education at a state university.
Oh, it's the best education ever.
Anybody else want to play? Rosie, you got one for any of them? All right, I got one. For you, Linda. It's been a year just about now since the Women's March on the day after the inauguration. How's the resistance?
The resistance is alive and well and breathing, Brian. What I will say, just on a personal level, as someone who is a part of the resistance, is that for me personally, it's been the best year of my life, but it's been the worst year of my life. And as we think about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and the whitewashing of who he was and what he stood for, and thinking about who we are and the things that we're going through, I want people to realize that Dr. Martin Luther King wasn't this man that was bringing white people and black people together. He was a black radical revolutionary who was spied on by the US government. The FBI at the time called him one of the most dangerous men in America. He wrote us letters from the Birmingham jail. He was a victim of police brutality. He was vilified. And only decades after his death did we now, all of a sudden, everyone wants to memorialize Dr. Martin Luther King. So and I say that to say that many of us who are on the front lines and all of us on the stage, nobody wants to be us right now. We have been met with vicious, vulgar, dangerous attacks by the opposition, and especially because we are women, and especially because we are women of color. They see some sort of vulnerability from us. And what we're saying to them is we are not afraid, and we are not intimidated. And the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and the women that organized with Dr. Martin Luther King is that they believed in the sanctity and the dignity of black life and the life of all human beings, and that's what we believe in this resistance. So when you're thinking about the things that you see and the protesting and the civil disobedience that we're engaging in, just remember that we're also mothers and we have children, and that our children deserve to live safely in this country, and that we do not and should not have to sacrifice as much as we do, but because we fight not just for our children, but for yours too. So when I think of Dr. Martin Luther King, I think of sacrifice. I think of pain and trauma and the many months and weeks that his children were without their father. And I think about the same for myself, the many times where I think about my own children and who my children are and what they're feeling in this moment when we live in a country that tells my beautiful Muslim children that they don't belong here, that their faith doesn't belong here. And it is my responsibility not only to fight for them on the streets or in the halls of Capitol Hill, but also at home, and fight for them to say you are worthy and you are beautiful and that I love you and our country will be forced to love you. So I want to offer that it's hard out here. It's not easy. And a lot of times we see the glam of the work that we do. People see, Rosa on the red carpet at the Golden Globes. They see me on the cover of Glamour magazine. They see Patrice got a new book out now that you all better buy. It's out in the hallway somewhere. And people think it's a glamorous life, but we want you to know that pray for us and pray for our families and support the women of color who are putting their lives on the line for all of you and for all of us. And I ask you also to be courageous, that when you hear something, that you stand up for us and you say that you will not take these sisters out, because these sisters are standing in the legacy of freedom fighters in these United States of America, and we are proud of the work that we are doing, and we are going to keep doing the work that we are doing because we believe in what we are doing, and we will demand that this country love us the way that we love our country.
Patrice, talk about your book a little bit. And one thing about it is that you put the word, is it terrorist or terrorism? Terrorist?
Terrorist.
In the title, which is a word that's usually overly applied to Linda's people these days. Why'd you put it in a book by the co-founder of Black Lives Matter?
Yeah. Thank you, Linda, for that word. Well, I think what's important for folks to understand, and in the book, I'm really hitting on a few themes. One is mass incarceration, the war on drugs, the war on gangs, and that while Black Lives Matter was called a terrorist organization, the co-founders of Black Lives Matter were called terrorists, Black people have been called terrorists for a really long time. And that, in fact, the language around terrorism was designated for Black people in this country and has now evolved because that's the way white supremacy works, right? Everybody has a potential to become a target unless you're white. And so when they call you a terrorist, really details a coming of age story. What makes someone turn into an activist? What makes someone end up putting their body on the line, their life on the line? And also the different ways in which not only I was called a terrorist, but the people in my family labeled as terrorists, as domestic terrorists, gang members, and legal language. The other term for gang members is domestic terrorist. And so the book is powerful. I still can't believe I wrote a book. I'm really grateful for all the support that it's received thus far. You can get it in the lobby, but more importantly, I'm trying to have a conversation with this country in this moment. We are living in a dangerous moment. It is not only scary to just be alive, it's scary to be an organizer, an activist, and I think we need inspiration. The book is about survival. I'm still here.
That's right.
Black folks are still here. It takes a level of creativity and genius to still be alive when something continues to try to kill you.
And what's the focus of Black Lives Matter now? I think it came, so much into the public awareness for a few years there. You, I believe, were personally at one of the Bernie Sanders campaign events where you made sure that Black Lives Matter was a thing. Some people did it at a Hillary Clinton campaign event. Probably nobody even bothered to do it at a Donald Trump campaign event. And yet, here we are. And yet I think we hear more about football players kneeling during the national anthem in the press these days than we do about the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
So where's it at?
We'll be walking down Colin Kaepernick Boulevard in 30 years, I promise you that.
Tell the truth. Tell the truth, girl. BLM, just like any movement, has its moment in the spotlight. I think for so many of us, we understand that the spotlight and media attention is not the only way you become a movement. I remember going to schools telling folks, I'm gonna be here when Black Lives Matter is trendy, and I'm gonna be here when it's not trendy.
That's right.
This is my life. I created Black Lives Matter out of a call for urgency, and this time is still urgent.
Yes.
Black people are still being killed by law enforcement. Black people are still dying in custody. Black women are still dying when they're giving birth to their children, and the year after they give birth to their children. Let's look at Erica Garner, right? There is still a crisis of anti-Black racism in this country, so Black Lives Matter is alive more than ever. And I think that we have to be careful, both media, but also us, in the room, on the stage. We have to be careful that when the cameras aren't there, that we don't become discouraged. Many folks in our movement, many reporters have said to me, "Where is Black Lives Matter? I haven't heard about y'all." I'm like, that's your question.
Yeah. Where are you?
Where are y'all? Because we're here.
We're doing the
We're gonna be here. Folks are still protesting. Folks are still marching. People are sitting with elected officials. They're building out legislation. The Black Lives Matter organization and movement is alive and well. And I feel like it's such an honor and privilege to be a part of this movement. It's an honor a privilege to be challenging this current administration in this moment.
And can I just say, because I know we're wrapping up, I'm a little bit older than Patrice and Linda, and I've been super blessed to have spent, quality time. Me and Patrice lived right next to each other for a year while this was, BLM was rising. And, you know, I said, I don't want to be like that little bit older person, but one of the things we have to do is, and no, as folks that we're called stars, which I don't like, you know, limelight, visibility is not power. Visibility is not power. So yes, I might have been at the Golden Globes last Sunday, but I was telling people, we walked that red carpet, but we were working that red carpet. Right. We weren't just there, but then part of it was like, there are moments where we should have joy in resistance. There are moments we need to celebrate. But, you know, I would just say this, that I think it's very important that if you are a woman in this work, non-gender conforming, queer, that you check in on your people. There are times where I will be like, Linda, you good? Do I have to come down? We got to go to dinner? Patrice, you good? And they do the same for us. Even though sometimes our political Black liberation line, we might find a different way of doing it, that should never break the bonds of sisterhood. Right. Ever break the bonds. And we got to support each other. We gotta love each other, and we always have to check in on each other and make sure that we got each other's back, because straight up, this woman, Linda, is enduring death threats, okay? Death threats. People are trying to kill her. We realize that. People trying to kill her. I don't even put myself in that category because I have not gone through the extent of what these two to my left and right have gone through. But I know that in movement work, when you're on those front lines, you can't just have people who are just going to be around you when the times are good.
Right.
Right? Sisterhood.
That's a word.
I am asked to remind you that Sisters Uptown Bookstore will be selling books by 3 of our panelists today in the Apollo lobby after the show ends, which will be pretty soon, including Patrice Culler's book, also Taylor Branch and Jean Thea Harris's books. But for now, please thank Rosa Clemente, Patrice Cullers, and Linda Sarsour.